Hello, Rob here, and welcome to R&B Reviews. Now, recently I have been doing a Q&A series on my channel, and someone asked me about the popular classic comedy team, the Three Stooges, and my thoughts on the films that they've made with their original leader, Ted Healy. So I decided to expand on that and review the team's first movie that they did called Soup to Nuts that was released by Fox in 1930. Now, what was the history of the team up to this point? Well, before the Three Stooges made their popular series of short comedies at Columbia in 1934, they were stooges to stand-up comedian Ted Healy. Ted was actually friends with Moe in their teens, and later on when they became adults, they each tried their hands at being stage performers in various acts before crossing paths again in the mid-1920s. Ted had found some success as a comedian, and he asked Moe to join his act. So the Stooges up to that point consisted of Moe Howard and his brother Shemp. Later, Ted encountered a violinist with frizzy hair named Larry Fine and added him to the act. Basically, the routine was the Stooges would interrupt Ted Healy's act, which consisted of him singing a song and doing some verbal comedy routines, and then they would do these the Stooges would do these silly, crazy gags with Ted smacking them, kind of like when Bud Abbott smacks Lou Costello when he tells a silly one-liner joke. They toured vaudeville and appeared on Broadway before making this film. So, Soup to Nuts, what is it about? Well, Ted Healy plays a salesman for the Schmidt costume shop, and he likes to hang around the fire station where Moe, Larry, and Shemp, and a fourth stooge named Fred Sanborn work. Otto Schmidt, played by Charles Windlinger, spends more time building crazy inventions than tending to his business, and as a result, he is bankrupt, and his business is taken over by his creditors, who send a young man named Carlson to manage the business. Now, Carlson immediately falls for Schmidt's niece, Louise, and tries to help turn the business around. Now, first off, it's very interesting to note in the opening credits that Ted Healy is given top billing, but the Stooges are billed under their own names. It's even more interesting to note that Moe is billed as Harry Howard instead of Moe Howard. His birth name was Moses Harry Horowitz, so maybe he thought Harry was more American sounding than Moe. But anyway, Soup to Nuts is a pre-code early talkie, which means that while you're watching this movie, you can tell that the movie makers were still trying to figure out sound, since the actors shout like they are on the stage, especially Ted Healy. However, the Stooges seem more natural. They don't really have their well-known personalities yet, with Shemp being more of a leader than Moe. This fourth stooge, Fred Sanborn, has more of a personality as a silent stooge. He basically has bushy eyebrows, a lopsided walk, and is constantly whispering in Ted Healy's ear and does a lot of the team's visual gags while the rest of the boys handle the verbal. Also, you'll notice that there really is no score except in the opening and closing credits, and when Ted Healy and the Stooges sing and do a comedy routine later on, since I believe at this point the music would have had to have been done live on the set instead of having background music. At least that's how I believe it was technologically at that point. It has often been suggested that Sanborn was hired for this film, but according to Larry's brother Moses in his book, Larry the Stooge in the Middle, Sanborn had actually been a member of the Stooges up to this point. He had been a xylophone player that fell on hard times when Healy encountered him and added him to his roster. Ted Healy does have some good one-liners, but his stage personality as a wisecracker doesn't really seem to translate very well to film. I can kind of see why he never really became a leading man in movies, but as comic support in movies like Mad Love with Peter Lorre, In the Air with Jack Benny, and San Francisco with Clark Gable. For a talkie, there is some good visual gags when at a time films were more about being dialogue-oriented rather than visual-oriented. As I was watching this movie, I was really surprised to see how many famous Stooge gags that appeared throughout their career appear in this movie. For example, the joke about how much gas the gas arrow is pointing halfway through, for example, and them getting stuck in a doorway together, and their famous coin-tossing routine. The supporting cast I found to be very hit and miss. I like Charles Willinger as Otto, the store owner, although I think later on in his career he would have a more polished and restrained performance in movies like the 1936 version of Showboat, Nothing Sacred, and State Fair. Healy's girlfriend Queenie is also a shouter and comes across more as a female Ted Healy with her one-liners. Lucille Brown is Otto's niece and has more of a natural performance without really getting to shouting. The movie is also contemporary to the time period because the costume shop is having financial troubles and other businesses are struggling, and some supporting characters are not able to spend money. Some gags don't hold up very well here. Healy and his girlfriend comically trade barbs with each other, and those are quite amusing.
Don't call me a donkey, you big ox. It's the girlfriend. Someday she'll make a great little wife of me. Shut up, you pest. You're breaking my eardrums.
I'm talking to Ted, my boyfriend. He's a darling. I'm crazy about him. I'll break your head when you get over here.
However, there are times when Healy threatens to hit Queenie and sometimes does, and that can be kind of unsettling. I think Healy's best scene is when he's selling a revolutionary general and his army war costumes. The Stooges get to have a scene of their own where they go to a diner and order food that doesn't go very well together. Later, Healy and the Stooges perform together at a party, and it kind of gives the idea of what their act must have looked like. This is probably the best scene in the movie. Healy sings a song, and the Stooges come in and interrupt him, and they trade jokes. Some of them showed up in the later MGM Healy short Play Nuts that the Stooges did. The results are funny. You also get a chance to see Fred Sanborn do his xylophone act for a bit. Finally, there's a climactic fire scene where the Stooges and Healy again trade jokes and visual gags with pleasing results. Ted Healy, I think, became more polished film performer later on when he and the Stooges joined MGM in 1933. I would say that Soup to Nuts is more of historical interest for people who want to see the Stooges' first film and how they functioned at that point. It runs at 70 minutes. It's not really a great movie, but it has its moments. So what happened to Healy and the Stooges right after this movie was made? Well, according to Moe's autobiography, Moe, Howard, and the Three Stooges, as well as some other sources like this book by Larry's brother, the Stooges were offered their own contract at Fox without Healy. Now, I can see why that diner sequence as well as the scene at the party I thought were the film's standouts. I could see how Fox executives would have wanted them. But when Healy found out, he talked the studio out of it, and, well, Moe and Shemp were frustrated, as well as I can imagine Larry were, so they decided to go out on their own. However, Fred Sandberg decided to go back to his career as a musician. So by 1932, it appears that both sides, appeared to have gotten back together and they made up. And eventually, but Shemp got tired of Ted Healy's back and forth behavior and was replaced by Moe and Shemp's younger brother, Jerome, aka Curly. They eventually signed with MGM, as I mentioned, for short subjects and feature films, both together and separately. And in 1934, MGM was giving Ted more work as comedic support, and Moe, as well as Healy's agent at the time, felt that Healy no longer needed the Stooges, so they mutually agreed to split up. The Stooges signed with Columbia to make their short films, and Healy continued to work until his mysterious death in 1937. Now, over the years, I've read that reviews from Stooge fans on various movie pages that they feel that Ted Healy wasn't very funny, despite being a popular stage comedian in the 1920s. But I think Healy could be funny, but I feel like he never really adjusted his performance to films very well. And unlike similar comedians like Bob Hope, who played a wisecracking, cowardly character, or Jack Benny, whose wisecracking but ongoing gag was always being stingy, Healy never really added more depth to his persona other than being a wisecracking character who throws one-liners here and there. Well, that's my review of the movie Soup to Nuts. If you've seen the movie, go ahead and post your comments below. And if you're a Stooge fan, have you seen their films with Ted Healy and what did you think about them? Go ahead and post your comments below. Please hit the like button and please consider being a subscriber. And if you're interested, go ahead and check out some other movie reviews on this channel. Thank you very much for watching.